if you're my generation, you've grown up with a remote control, a zap. But I think, the next generation is swipe. The number of devices out there on mobile is just exponentially more than obviously the connected home. So what we're seeing is the mobile content, whether you're on the bus or on the way to work or at school, the viewership is exponentially going off the scale.
This week has been a big week for Synamedia. We've got Steve Reeves back in the studio to talk about what I can probably summarise, Steve, as going from Zap to Swipe.
Yes, NAB was a big reveal for us for our next generation shorts, so Go Shorts. So we're trying to change the paradigm from Zap to Swipe. So what does that mean? I think, if you're my generation, you've grown up with a remote control, is a zap. But I think, the next generation is swipe. And I think that's where we're going.
I love this, Steve. Like, if you think about the different, well, obviously generational inclinations, I actually think that's relaxing a bit as well. Like, we're all familiar with Instagram and all that sort of stuff now. So the whole swipe psychology immediately brings a vision to my mind of what you're trying to engender in next generation OTT functionality. But also what's really interesting, maybe at a bit more of a nerdy level, is not only the generations, but the geographies that are using mobile devices to consume content. We've spoken before about Africa as well, where Africa fascinates me. Sub-Saharan Africa fascinates me. Not only has there been a lot of activity over the last 2 years in terms of ownership of the content organizations there, but so much of the population there are now consuming via mobile because of the connectivity that they've got. Africa's a region that you're already operating in.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I think what we're hearing, and we've been out speaking to lots of customers across the world. So, the mobile consumption is obviously growing. Everyone knows this. This isn't new and revolutionary. But, I think the number of devices out there on mobile is just exponentially more than obviously the connected home. So, what we're seeing is, people using the mobile to consume content. We talk about, viewership on the TV at home, but, the mobile content, whether you're on the bus or on the way to work or at school, people are really using and consuming content. The viewership is exponentially going off the scale. So
how's the reaction been at NAB?
It was unbelievable. So I think, in the lead up to NAB, we were sort of testing the market and getting some feedback. But I think, whether we were in Bangkok or Buenos Aires, everyone loves it. So I think, it's really resonating with the market. It feels like a conundrum that isn't regional. It's more of a global problem. And I think, Go Shorts really hits the mark and gives the market something that they've been asking for.
If I think of some of the conversations that I've had over the last couple of years particularly, and some of the platforms that we've got here in the Middle East, that really kind of demonstrate that the convergence between social media and the psychology that social media creates and streaming or OTT platforms, what you've described as Zap to Swipe brings these things even closer, right? It's actually cross-pollinating between what users are doing on social media and bringing it over into OTT.
Yeah, I think what we looked at, when we sat down, we took some market polls, etc., and we tried to look at what, how the next gen were, consuming their content, and sort of bringing that Zap to Swipe mentality, and swiping content onto your big screen TV was something that really we thought actually there's something here, because as a 15-something teenager, they're used to like watching it. But if you could slide that content and swipe that content onto your big screen, like that was powerful. And I think, the moment we saw that and, with the customer feedback we got, we were like, there's definitely something here. And we poked and we prodded, we refined it. And I think, the result is Go Shorts, and, NAB was the vehicle to launch it.
What you've just said makes me think, what's the, at a really basic level, if you don't mind me asking, Steve, what's the swipe functionality? What's the kind of range of what you'll be able to swipe in the platform?
So I think, if you look at, your general consumption on a mobile, it's very vertical. So that vertical UI, but the ability to, I would say cast, but cast is the wrong word, go cast onto screen. Yeah. It's not casting in the traditional sense, is casting via the cloud, but being able to swipe the content as you view it on your device, swipe that content onto the large screen TV, and then continue to use your mobile as a mobile. So
if I were using a provider that's using your technology, I'd be able to select the content on my mobile, and then swipe it over onto.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Absolutely. And if you get, if I put the analogy that I would use is, squabbling over the remote control is now going to be squabbling over the control of the TV, because you can swipe, so potentially you can have your other son swiping his content on the screen. So
that's going to cause arguments.
It's going to cause great arguments, and we're working on how we refine that. But I think the fact that we're talking about it, the fact that we're arguing over it, means that we've disrupted the market, and I think that's what Synamedia wants to bring. We want to innovate, we want to lead, and I think Go Shorts hits a problem that we've been hearing for a long time, and gives I think with all innovations, there's always, some disruption, and I think this is certainly one of those.
Well, you've got a history of doing lots of R&D and innovation, all that sort of stuff. That's very much part of the characteristic of Synamedia. What I love about it, Steve, is that it makes me, if I were doing it in my house, it makes me feel like Neo in the Matrix. Being able to throw my content at the big screen, it kind of creates a different type of interactivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I look at the other pivot, obviously we had conditional access, and obviously that was a big part of Synamedia's history and legacy. And then for me, the PVR back in the day was a real shape shift on how people consume content, and I think that really was a product that sort of took viewership to the next level. And then I think now that mobile consuming world is definitely the next big pivot, I think, for the market and the industry as a whole.
I don't know what you think, Steve, but it's really interesting. What you've just said makes me think that the mobile is almost becoming the primary device.
I'm going to pick up on that, primary device. We would question if there isn't a primary device anymore, because you said exactly that, the mobile device, but there's not just one mobile device in your house. Going back to my analogy about fighting over the remote control, fighting over control of the TV, there is now no longer a primary device, or there's multiple primary devices with, multiple mobiles in the house. So it's a different mindset. And I think, it keeps everyone in the industry refreshed, trying to come up with new and innovative ways to...
It's the blend of things that it creates as well, Steve, because if I think of technology providers that have worked on second screen solutions over the last few years, and then the evolution of those things into automotive, for example. The provision of content is interesting into automotive, but then when you get into conversations around second screen devices, and that implies a first screen device, the primary, all of that's changing. Everything's changing.
I think everything's changing. I think, all of the old rules that, that we've grown up with, that the industry's growing up with, I think we need to relearn. We need to reprogram, what are the rules of the game. And I think that's what keeps it so interesting. I think that's what keeps so many people in this industry. The industry's full of long timers, but I think it's because it's such an exciting, it keeps reinventing itself as the tech moves along. And obviously, a lot of us are tech nerds underneath it all as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the difference that makes a difference, in my observation over the last 6 years or so, being a headhunter in this market, is so basic. It's people's attitude towards their purpose and what they do, and their motivation around why they do it. And I think if you get the perfect blend of those things, you get really open-minded people that are looking around at what's happening in the market. And I kind of see that en masse at the moment, especially over the course of 2026. And here we are in April, and you guys are demonstrating that you're hitting the road and getting traction with this new way of rejuvenating the recognition of what Go is. And I love the zap to swipe thing. I think that's
we're really proud of that. We're really proud. That was that was a eureka moment. I think the zap to swipe. When that came up, we were like, that's good. We'll use that. So,
well, I'm glad that NAB has gone well for you. We'll check in with each other later in the year on how the zap to swipe thing has gone. And thanks for coming back on, Steve.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.